Islam is rising in Uganda. Muslims in Uganda are a minority, but they are now starting to rise in the economic and educational fields. But their role in politics is still constrained by the legacy of British colonial policies that marginalized them. Uganda, officially the Republic of Uganda, is a landlocked country in East Africa. It is bordered to the east by Kenya, to the north by South Sudan, to the west by the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to the southwest by Rwanda, and to the south by Tanzania. Uganda is in the African Great Lakes region. It lies within the Nile Basin, and has a varied equatorial climate. As of 2024, it had a population of around 49 million, of which 8.5 million live in the capital and largest city, Kampala. Uganda is an overwhelmingly Christian majority country, with Islam being the second most widely professed faith. According to the 2014 national census, Islam in Uganda was practiced by 14% of the population. However, the CIA fact book puts the figure at 16%. The Uganda district in the east of Uganda had the highest percentage of Muslims. The roots of Islam in Uganda can be traced to the 17th century in the era of coastal trade. Some Egyptian, Sudanese and Turkish traders had penetrated northern Uganda as early as the 17th century. They established trade routes and introduced Islam informally wherever they passed. Later, the Nubian soldiers strengthened the Islamic influence in Akoli through intermarriages. According to Muhammad Sekatawa, a historian, it was the Sudanese Muslim soldiers employed by Khedive Ismail of Egypt, who brought Islam to northern Uganda, West Nile and some parts of Bunyoro in the 1830s. The influence of Buganda Kingdom appears to be clear as an important factor in the spread of Islam in Uganda. Professor Abk Kasozi says Islam was introduced to the indigenous people of Buganda in 1844, when the Arab traders received a warm welcome from then Kabaka of Buganda, King Sunna II, reigned from 1832 to 1856. It is important to note that the traders were not propagators of Islam. It was through their commercial and social contacts that indigenous Africans adopted the new faith. Sunna's son, King Mutesa I, reigned 1856 to 1884, accepted Islam and worked towards its propagation within and outside the kingdom. Islam was at the peak in Buganda and Uganda generally between 1860s and 1870s, and Professor Kasozi refers to this period as the Golden Age of Islam. Kabaka or King Rashid Kalima Muguluma, reigned 1888 to 1889, embraced Islam, and fought for Islam. Prince Nuhu Mbogo, 1833 to 1921, led Muslims and fought for it, and his son, Prince Buthru Kakungulu, 1907 to 1991, made remarkable contributions to Islam that are still visible, for example the formation of Uganda Muslim Education Association, UMEA, in 1940s. Ugandan Muslims from Kawempe, the area where Mbogo was buried in a royal tomb, built one of the biggest mosques in the country as a memorial for Nuhu Mbogo. The mosque is named Mbogo Mosque. In Busangara, western Uganda, Islam was introduced by Arab traders from Tanzania, through Nyamatanga in Mbarara, and the Baganda who were in exile due to wars. The colonial era between 1894 and 1962 was a real disaster to Muslims in Uganda. Sekatawa argues that the British colonialist marginalized Muslims in all spheres of life, education, land ownership, economy, and political leadership. And factionalism was undoing of the fortunes of the Muslims during the colonial era, he said. And to date, Muslims are still marginalized in the sharing of the national cake. Out of the 75 ministers, Muslims have one substantive cabinet minister only and 5 state ministers in the less influential sectors. According to reports, between 1979 and 1985, Muslims in Ankole, Bushenyi, Arua, Koli, Masaka, and Kampala were brutally murdered as a celebration of Idi Amin's downfall. In Kaziba now Shima district, Muslims were said to have been killed and dumped in River Wizi. This case is not yet resolved and Muslims are still demanding for justice. According to Dr. Abbas Kiimba, an associate professor of literature at Makerere University, the state must apologize for this, compensate the victims and the perpetrators be prosecuted. Despite persecution by the British, Islam flourished in the colonial period, and was said to be fastest-growing religion in Uganda by a colonial officer in the 1950s. Mosques were built in almost every established city in Uganda, and the Uganda Muslim Education Association, founded by Prince Buthru Kakungulu with help by Asian Muslims, built hundreds of primary schools, through introducing Western educational curriculum into madrasa schools across the country. Prominent elders, like Sheikh Swabu Samakula and Juma Tamuzanj, started teaching Islam in their homes later. Mosques were established as well and their verandas acted as schools. Maulana Sheikh Abdurazak Matovu, the first mufti of Uganda, introduced the formal teaching of Islam in a school environment with a syllabus between 1963 and 1964 when he established Nadwatul Ulama, currently known as Bilal Schools Bways. Education by far has been an area of pride for the Muslim community since 1935, with the traditional academic giants like Kibuli, Nabisunsa, Kawempe and Gom leading the lot. Statistically, there are over 1,500 Muslim-founded primary schools, more than 160 Muslim secondary schools, 5 technical institutions, 2 primary Muslim teacher training colleges and 2 universities. Muslim children are also being subjected to a dual curriculum, Islamic and academic sciences, in many schools throughout the country. Nearly in all cases these figures above represent 10% of the general national picture. We have greatly made a contribution in education sector. Islamic University in Uganda, IUIU, alone has graduated more than 17,000 students in different fields, and we have expanded the university into 4 campuses to benefit all people in the region. Our impact is in about 16 African countries that send us students, remarks Dr. Ahmad Kawisa Sanjendo, the rector of IUIU. IUIU, an affiliated institution of Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, was established by an Act of Parliament in 1988. The late President Idi Amin Dada registered Uganda in OIC by 1974, and Uganda as a country has benefited from this institution especially through the Islamic Development Bank, IDB. Dr. Warda Mummy Rajab Jayagenda, who works at IUIU as Director of Research, Innovations and Publications, says the numbers have grown and many are aware of Islam. She is however skeptical about the moral degeneration in Uganda generally, that might challenge this fast-growing community. Historian Muhammad Sekatawa observes that Muslims who were only in petty jobs of driving vehicles and managing restaurants and slaughterhouses are now managing companies, outstanding businesses, articulating in parliament, running law firms and consultancies. But, Muslims in upcountry regions like Ekoli, Karamoja, Kapchorwa, Western Uganda, Tiso, still suffering from high poverty. They need help to be able to set up and operate Islamic primary and secondary Muslim schools that can inculcate the Islamic values at an early stage. Ekoli Kadi, Sheikh Khalil, calls upon Uganda Muslim Supreme Council to put up Quran schools in his area, that can be a convert center, and attract donors to the war-ravaged area, as well as regain property that was vandalized with the fall of Amin, and provide more scholarships for excellent but poor children.